I just fell on my knees. I said, God, if you're real, help me. All these years I had flirted with death. But when I felt like I was going to die, I wanted to live.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Tales from the Journey. I'm Stephanie Zamora, and today we are here with Danny Sanchez, and I'm really excited for this interview. I had an opportunity to read his book. He shared it with me, and it's amazing. But Danny grew up in the juvenile incarceration system and lived a violent life, including police brutality, suicide attempts, and surviving multiple stabbings. Today, Danny is a city chaplain and the founder of the City Peace Project, a nonprofit organization in San Jose, California, where he inspires youth through his innovation as a social entrepreneur. And his book is also called Post-Traumatic Quest, My Quest to Transcend Trauma, Turn My Pain into Purpose, and Find Peace, which is such a beautiful title and is so aligned with this show. So Danny, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited. Let's start with you sharing a little bit more about yourself and what it is that you do.
So I am the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called the City Peace Project. We started with public high schools, but now we're from K through 12th grade. We do mentoring, life coaching, conflict resolution, goal setting, and just helping students to stay focused. And it's something that personally for me, I wish I had like a coach or a mentor in my life when I was younger to kind of guide me through. I'm also the lead crisis responding chaplain for the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force in San Jose. We respond to homicide and bedside intervention for youth violence.
That's incredible. And so again, thank you for sharing your book with me. We're going to link to it in the show notes and we'll definitely talk about it more later on in this interview, but it was such an incredible read. And right out the gate, right from your childhood, there was just a lot of chaos and a lot of exposure to violence and guns. Like that was like the first story that you share is just, and I think you even wrote this in your book, like it's insane that you and your brother like survived your childhood. So I would love if you could take us back to kind of the beginning of your journey, what your childhood was like and how some of those experiences shaped you.
Yeah, like you shared, my childhood, there was guns around my house. Yeah, there was domestic violence. It was interesting because, I have these two histories, right? These two pictures of my past. One of the fun times we're having with, my family sitting together and eating, and one, my mom and dad arguing, or we're hiding behind a couch. And part of the things that I've seen in my life a lot were, drugs and guns and fighting and arguing in our home. And it just made me really fearful. I didn't know when my life was going to fall apart very young because, my dad would storm out of the house. My mom would be yelling. So it was just partially like a scary time, but I try to remember the good times, but they're very spotty. When I was younger, they're just, sometimes I remember, like playing in the backyard with my brother, my dad working on the car, my mom cooking dinner. But then there's these other episodes that happened in between, So I think part of the way it shaped me was like seeing violence in my home and seeing the violence in my community. I thought it was just what everybody did as a child. I wasn't really like a violent person, when I was younger. I knew I had to protect myself. And I think that's what kind of shaped me. My coping mechanism was like, well, I'll fight back, no matter what. I'm not going to let anybody hurt me.
Yeah, that's kind of an intense way to start out life, is just like having domestic abuse and having violence in the house, but also having that worldview of, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like there was almost this like necessity to violence in your mind. Like this is something that I need to cultivate in myself. And that might not have been a conscious thought, but if it was something that you felt like you needed to incorporate into your way of being in your life, like that's just such a intense way to start out life, but you didn't know any better. I mean, that was your world. And what was it like for you? I mean, going through school, like share with us how that really influenced your path and how that led you to being incarcerated.
Well, school was terrible for me. I was a mama's boy. I always wanted to be home. My mom and dad were divorced when I was about 4 years old, and I felt a sense of loss, and I didn't want to be alone, and I never wanted my mom to leave because I thought that she would leave also. When I went to school, I would throw tantrums. Like I was one of those kids that to get what I wanted, I would throw a tantrum. I remember my mom, one time we were in a Kmart and I wanted a toy and I knew she had no money. I mean, I didn't know she had no money, but she didn't have any money, and she stuffed it in her purse and, sold the toy for me. That's how much of I got to keep it real. I was a brat, I wasn't, but I think when I went to school, it was terrifying because I lost control. when my dad left the home, I had no control of my dad not being there. I loved my dad to be there, whether he was arguing with, whether he was playing with us or they were arguing. As long as he was there, I wanted him present. When he was gone, I felt this heavy sense of loss. And then, like I couldn't control any situations. And then, my mom would go out a lot when I was younger, and I would hold on to her arm, not wanting her to go out. She worked 12 hours a day. She was a young mother. She still wanted to go out and throw tantrums like, don't go. And she'd have to put me to bed. I think my grandparents had her because we live with my grandparents, had her put me to bed and would cling to her, every night, hoping that, she wouldn't leave because I was holding on to her, or she would take me with her to the disco, I remember the first day of school, I threw the tantrum of all tantrums, because I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to be with my mom, and I had no power over that. She left me at school, and I had no idea how to navigate school at all. I don't remember like reading at home or coloring ABCs. I just don't remember that. It could have happened, but it's so for me, it was really hard learning. It was very difficult from the beginning. So, I acted out in other ways. Some children do. I acted out like, making funny noises in class, not sitting in my seat, picking at other people, irritating the teacher, anything that I wouldn't get called to do something so that I wouldn't be exposed that I didn't know. And I'm kind of moving through my grades, but that's kind of how it was. And so,
that's great. Yeah.
Honestly, like elementary school is one of the worst experiences of my life. I look back and I felt like, like I was always in trouble. When there was recess because I didn't do my work, I would be kept in class to do work that I didn't have any idea how to do. So I was constantly in trouble and I was constantly playing around, and a few fights happened in elementary school, but I wasn't really like a fighter, but it was just like the neighborhood, like if somebody like, like bumped you or said something to you, you just fight.
Yeah.
I didn't give it a second thought. It's just the way. And I'm from the Silicon Valley. Everybody looks at the Silicon Valley. This is the tech capital of the world. I'm from the heart of Silicon Valley, San Jose, right?
Yeah.
San Jose, East Side San Jose. It's different. It's a different side to the Silicon Valley everyone sees in, Forbes or any other type of magazine or Business Week or whatever it is. It's beautiful. I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's a beautiful place. I love the culture. A lot of the community is Latino, and you can see the influence of the art and the food and everything around where I grew up. But also, there was gangs, there was, people dealing drugs and those types of things. I never thought twice, that fighting was like bad. And when I got in trouble for fighting, I'm like, why? I was defending myself. It wasn't until, middle school that I was getting bullied. And this is in the book, and I'll share a little bit about it, but I was getting bullied. And my brother, I had an older brother who would back me up every time something would happen. And I got in this fight in San Jose. And I remember that I was terrified of this person, but I just started swinging at him. And I can remember to this day the images of people like looking at me and cheering me on, and how it shifted something inside of me. Like, whoa, like this is really who I am. I'm this person that you're going to respect me through my fist, And so that was what shaped me into really start fighting. That was probably in 6th grade. I was probably about 13 years old or 12 years old. That was when I really knew that not only was it to protect myself, but it was also to get what I wanted with fighting.
And what stood out to me about your book, especially in the early chapters, is how there's such this it felt to me as the reader like this disconnect between like Danny on the inside and Danny on the outside, and for different reasons. Like it sounded like there were times that you wanted to feel something, but instead of being able to like create experiences where you could feel that connection or that love or that support, like you said that you would actually like, it seemed like you would do things that would push people away. And then that same piece of acting out or being the class clown or whatever side of yourself or persona or whatever it is that came out that got like respect and attention in order to keep people from seeing what you believed was that you weren't intelligent, you weren't smart. Yeah. And I loved the way that you shared that, because I think that that's true for everyone in different ways. Like we all have this inner part of ourselves that we want people to see, and somehow we manage to keep them from seeing it. Or we have these pieces that we work really, really hard to hide away from the world. And I know that I don't know you well, but from your writing, from the brief interaction we've had so far, like I can tell that you have such a big caring heart, and obviously you do. You're doing such amazing work with children that's so needed, that we all could have used when we were younger. And I would love if you could share a little bit about that. Like, what was it like to step more into this persona, this side of yourself that was big and powerful and aggressive, or, however you would define it, also knowing that on the inside, like, there was very much like a softness to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be, I wanted to have relationships. I didn't know how to have deep relationships because they weren't in my home. My parents, I can't remember much of their marriage, and it wasn't very like loving in the sense of like, this is our family, like, hey, let's go for a picnic or something like that. It was things where it just seems to shift all the time from yelling or then talking. And then, I don't even remember hugging, a lot, my dad. And so I think that's part of what shaped that of me, but I really long for it, like, I don't know, later on in my book, I share how I watched my dad with my younger siblings. And I was a teenager already, and I was looking at my younger siblings, which are much younger than me, like crawling all over him. And I wanted that so bad, but I had to be the tough guy. I had to be the guy that could fight. And I didn't want to show that to anybody. It's interesting because when I was a little boy, we all have dreams, right? Everybody has a dream what they want to do. And I wanted to be a doctor, or like I wanted to be a firefighter, because I know people in those occupations helped other people, right? And that's the only way. I looked at my community and I knew that my community needed help. And I thought I want to help them, but somewhere between, like I said, sixth grade or like a fifth grade, is fourth and sixth grade, those dreams died. That persona brought me a lot of attention because people liked that I could fight. They liked that I can back them up. They liked, feeling protected. It made me feel like I did something right. I went through school having all Fs. You could tell I have a lisp. Everybody made fun of my lisp all the time. Like, there was just everything negative. So when it came to fighting, that was something for me that was positive. That was something for me that, like, I'm in control. Like, and if I'm not, I'm going to put myself in a position of control. I would fight, win or lose, whatever it took. And people, like, I demanded respect from people. It was, that wears you out. It was a difficult tension, inside of my heart, because again, anytime people got close to me, whether it was dating or whether it was family or friends, there was always that tension there that I had to be this person, this tough. And that was tough. I hurt my friends, and, a lot of broken relationships and family because of that. A lot of that is, like why I want to build, a newer relationship with the people that I work with students, and build relationship and community with them that's positive, because I think I see me in a lot of young people that I work with, and I see in some areas of where we live at, there is a lot of tension, there is a lot of violence, and I think it's children are sponges. They do what they see, and I have the amazing opportunity to step in and teach them, hey, we have another way.
And it's so, so important. I can't wait to talk more about your work, because I'm so passionate about bringing this type of work to kids when they're at a certain age before they get caught up in everything. But we'll get to that, because I want to chat a little bit more about, you, and I love how vividly you describe that moment, like remembering people cheering you on when you're fighting, and how that shaped you and continued to evolve. This is kind of my personal curiosity, because this stuff is stuff that I'm passionate about, stuff that I find very interesting. Did you feel like at any point, because you went through a lot, like multiple stabbings, being incarcerated, like there was a lot of violence and fighting, there was a lot that was going on in your life, very chaotic. At any point, do you feel like you just completely lost sight of your heart, or did you always kind of feel it in there at some level? I
drank a lot, so I covered that, the sensitive part of me. There was a real sensitive part of me, and I couldn't handle it. A lot of my life, it was very difficult to handle, because being sensitive meant to open up, and I didn't want to open up to anybody because I didn't want to get hurt. I think the divorce and relationships that my mom and dad had outside of, when after they were divorced, really affected me, like, deeply, that I couldn't trust anybody. And the things that happened to me personally, I've been abused, physically abused, sexually abused. I would never let myself be in that position again. The more that I grew, I wanted to protect myself, because those things happened when I was younger, and when I was vulnerable, or when I was high out of my mind. And I'm like, I'm never going to let this stuff happen to me again. I'm going to be on high alert every second. No one's going to hurt me again. It's a little emotional, because I think about where I came from, and the healing that's been happening, in my life. And it's still a process, right? Through our entire life.
Absolutely.
Part of it. But so I covered it with alcohol, and it came out, and drunken nights crying alone in my home. I burned so many bridges. I remember many Christmases alone in a rented camper with 240 ounces of alcohol, drinking myself to sleep because nobody wanted me around. But I created that for myself.
Yeah. Whew. What I love so much about this show and the people that I get to talk to is sometimes I just stop and think like it's amazing that so many of us are just like walking around in the world.
Yeah.
With everything that we've been through. And I think about some of my clients who have been through things that if they were to share them, it would sound completely made up. Like it's just so horrific and awful what we go through as humans in so many different ways. And the fact that you kept going and we find ways, right? Like we have our coping mechanisms and we learn ways to move through the world to keep going. And I know you said that you had suicide attempts. If you're open to sharing a little bit about what kind of those darker points in your life were, I would love to hear about that. That's something that I relate to in my own way. And I know other people do as well, as like hitting those points of rock bottom where it's like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And what were those experiences like for you?
I did not, like when I was older, and, in the book I share about my first time being incarcerated, and I was in juvenile hall, and I remember when I was convicted of a felony and I was like 13 or 14 years old, and I'm like, my life is over. Like I didn't even care. I remember those moments in my life where things had happened to me. Like, what am I going to do with myself? Like, I'm just going to be a convict. I'm uneducated. What's going to happen with my life? I didn't fear death. I would flirt with death a lot. The fights. I've been in car accidents, many car accidents. Like, honestly, if I look back at my life, there's a lot of pain. When we talk, like, not just fighting, not just emotional, drunk driving, being in the car as it's, flipping, just so many different things that have happened to me. The stabbings, I've been stabbed 11 times, but none of those were like a wake up call for me. It's just like, I was like, bring it on. I don't care. Like, I didn't care whether I lived or died. And my family and friends knew it. They didn't think I'd live past 21. A lot of my family was, you're not going to make it. What triggered me, I think the biggest was when a friend of mine committed suicide. We weren't super close, but, I'd be at his house a lot and we'd hang out, we'd talk. And I remember hearing one day that he committed suicide. Another mutual friend of ours found him. And I really got obsessed with it at that moment. I was obsessed with it. I already had thought about it before and flirted with suicide, but it was like an obsession at that point, like where I was like, well, what's, just every thought imaginable, like, what did it feel like? Is he done with this? And, everything. And so maybe a week after that, I tried to commit suicide by taking pills, but I ended up vomiting them out. I cut my wrist and I was cutting myself a lot. I wanted to hang myself. And a friend of mine found me, getting ready to do that. And just those type of things. It was interesting because part of me wanted to be found so people would know the pain that I'm going through.
Yeah.
And then part of me was like, I don't care. But it was, now that I'm thinking about it too, it's like, I did want to be found. There were people home when I tried to overdose on pills, or when I was in the friend's garage, they were all outside partying. When I was doing that, we're just drinking. And when I made myself a makeshift noose in this garage, and I just didn't care. I just felt like nobody loved me. Like the deep part inside of me just really wanted somebody to genuinely care for me. I think we all feel like that, right? We all feel like we want to be loved and we want to be supported, but there was none of that going on. So, that was a really, a dark stretch of my life. And alcohol and drugs added to the fire of that. Constantly thinking about, constantly putting myself in these situations. And I think the things that really pushed me over the edge were broken relationships. I went from, dating, breakup. I had a son at 17 and I thought that would fix everything. But of course it didn't. I was still in the same mindset I was. And, I think, I felt like the only escape was, death. And again, I just like, if I was in a situation, that something could happen to me, like it didn't bother me.
I think I know there's a lot of conversation about this out in the world, but that conversation about how most people that are suicidal don't actually want to die. They just want the pain to end. I relate to that myself. And I actually had a suicide loss. That's what really started my big challenging chapter and just a ton of trauma and things that I went through. It's such a confusing experience for people who aren't familiar with it. And I think it's also confusing if you're close to someone who commits suicide or has suicidal ideation and you don't understand that level of pain and that drive. And I totally relate to the wanting, it doesn't make any sense. Again, it doesn't make any sense to, I think, to ourselves especially, but also to the people around us, that it's like, well, if you want love, why would you kill yourself? If you want people to, like, but that's just like the frame of mind that we're in is such a different space, and the pain is unimaginable, and the desire for that to end is such a driving part of it. And I'm so sorry that you experienced that, and I'm so glad that you're still here, because you're clearly a lover and you clearly have so much to give to the world. And I would love if you could talk about how, when you hit a turning point, and what that looked like for you, because I know for some people there's like moments that are like, oh, like, you know, like they just like change us overnight, and for some people there's these like tiny moments that build. And what was it like for you?
Yeah, you know, you nailed it. The pain, you wanted it to end. You know, like I wanted that pain to end, and it was just that sense of emptiness. There was just like a void for me that I wanted to end. And there, you know, of course, I mean, again, I've been stabbed multiple times. Like I can't feel this part of my arm. You know, there's probably nerve damage here, and you know, just all over my body. I have these, you know, it wasn't one time, it was different fights and different things that have happened to me. When I was stabbed in the kidney, and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. They had to do exploratory surgery on me. They had to, you know, to see where the damage was at. So they had to do this surgery on me. And I remember that didn't even change me. It was like less than a week I was out. I was drinking, the car accidents, other near-death experiences. I just didn't care. But when I was about 29 years old, I was on parole, you know. I was in and out of the justice system. So that's another thing. That's a whole other trauma besides this, you know, because the things that you have to do to survive when you're incarcerated, you know, that help you to live, you know, help you to be successful in that life are not, you don't use those in the real world. You know, and I remember the first time I was incarcerated, when I got out, I got 30 days I was with somebody, an older kid. I think I was 14, and he snatched a purse. They identified me as the person that did it. And before I was even, you know, went to court or anything, I was in juvenile hall, and I had to stay there for 30 days. And I'm claustrophobic. They locked me in a room. There was a lot of trauma that happened there. There was, you know, because I'm banging on the door screaming, then I had to defend myself because people were making fun of me the next day. So I fought every day, you know, when I was incarcerated. And I remember just the day that I got out, like the world outside had just, you know, kept going, but something really shifted in me. For 13 years about, I was in and out of the justice system every year. And I was on parole. So I was about 29 years old, and I was on parole. I wasn't allowed to drink, of course, not do drugs, right? And the day before, my parole officer, I knew I had an appointment the next day, and a friend came over and offered me drugs. And of course I couldn't say no. And I heavily drank all night. The next morning I was panicking because I violated my parole. I'm going to share this with you. When I went to prison for the first time, maybe a little bit over a year out of 16 months, the first day I got out, I drank, and I was charged with absconding, which means I just took off, never reported my parole officer. 28 days later, I went back to prison.
Wow.
They sent me. I was San Quentin, you know, and then get out. I go to Folsom Prison for absconding for a violation of parole. I get out of Folsom Prison on Friday. I'm back incarcerated by Monday.
Wow.
So, you know, that's how things were going. And so this is where my life was at. Like I'm in my late 20s. I'm doing nothing with my life. Now I'm going to go back probably to prison, you know, for a violation of parole. Someone had mentioned there's, you know, people that are in and out of being incarcerated talk about, you know, if you drink baking soda, it'll clean out your system. I remembered that, and I said, well, you know what? I need to drink a lot of baking soda because I am, you know, I need to clean my system out because I have like 2 hours before a parole officer comes. So I just poured baking soda into water and started just downing it. And then I started to vomit, and I kept vomiting, and I couldn't stop, and I started to shake. And I remember the vomit, it started to look like a dark blood, and I started to like shake. And I'm like, I'm getting dizzy, and am I going to pass out? Am I dying? Like, what's happened to me at this moment? And I remember, I fell to my knees, and you know, I had an uncle who was, you know, in and out of the justice system that became a pastor later, and he would preach to me, and I did not want to hear it at all. And, but I remember some of the words he said to me, and people were saying to me, and, you know, for me personally, like, I just fell on my knees, and I said, God, if you're real, like, help me. All these years I had flirted with death. But when I felt like I was going to die, I wanted to live.
Yeah.
And I remember I called out to God, and I said, if you're real, um, can you help me, God? And I remember at that moment, I felt so alive. I never felt so alive in my entire life. I was like, and I just, from there, like my life just changed. Like I felt sober at that moment. Like I felt sober, emotionally sober, physically sober, just like deep, deep sobriety and freedom at that moment. Like where I felt like, wow, like, and, that was my moment right there. You know, I was in my mom's bathroom. No one was home. There's like blood all over the sink. I'm on the floor. I'm sweating, and I'm just like, oh, I'm alive. You
Yeah.
know, and that sparked something in me that would really, like, the shell broke off, and I
Mm.
remember that at that moment it was changed. My faith, in God and
Yeah.
Jesus Christ changed me radically. It just did something to me where I don't know. I mean, I can't explain the experience. It was so powerful for me.
That's beautiful. That gives me goosebumps. And I've had my very different, but I've had moments that are very divine. And I forget who writes about them, but there's someone who talks to them about breakthrough experiences, and they show up for us in different ways. Sometimes they are near death experiences. Sometimes they are like random insignificant moments where you're just like wheeling your grocery cart through the store and the light hits it just right. There's just all these different ways that it shows up. And I had my own when I was really depressed and was just like sobbing my eyes out. But there are these experiences, and they're different for everybody. But there is that
Yeah,
sense of awareness
yeah,
of ourselves, but also like that greater piece at play. And for some people that's God, and for some people
yeah,
that's universe, whatever it might be, but like that
yeah,
connection to the greater energy at play and ourselves is like such a transformational moment. So that gave me goosebumps. Thank you for sharing
yeah,
it.
yeah. I felt love, deep sense of love.
Yeah.
And I think any other experience of love was, I thought it was like relationship, but this was something that just felt so real for me. But yeah, that was the moment. Like I every time I think about it, it just reminds me of freedom. It reminds me of love. It reminds me of newness. Every time I share that moment in my life, because it's powerful. I've been addicted as long as I can remember, and to be able to be free from addiction
Yeah.
is like the most beautiful thing, because I think, because I get really obsessed with things. I would get really obsessed if I drank until I passed out, blacked out, whatever it was, drugs until they're gone. Like my heart's beating. I'm doing crystal meth, and I'm shaking. As far back as I can remember, I've had that addictive behavior, and I felt so free. It felt like, wow. And again, that's where everything switched for me. Like my whole life switched around.
Reorienting is like such a big topic on the show. And again, it's one of those things that's different for everyone depending on their experience. What was it like for you to have such a transformational moment and to have that switch happen, and literally in the middle of playing out your same pattern in life, right? Like you had just violated your parole again. The whole reason that you got that sick is because you're trying to like course correct at the last minute, and you had been in and out of the justice system. Like you really found a way to hit the brakes, and in doing so, like that transformational moment happened. What did it look like for you to really reorient to yourself as a person and to start reorienting to your life so that you could create something different?
Yeah, I started, I left a lot of, like, my old life, friends, immediately. I kind of, I knew my influences. I mean, I'm not saying I was a bad influence on a lot of others also, but, I removed myself for a time where I know I'd be like tempted to get high, or tempted, because my friends were into everything, whether it's, like, if you read my book, there's breaking into homes, stealing cars. I mean, drive-bys. These are the people that I was hanging around with, and I just removed myself from it. And people were like, "What is wrong with you, dude?" I mean, I had to change my mindset. Like I was like, I don't want to talk like I talk anymore. I don't want to like think like I thought before. I don't want to, I had a girlfriend, like we broke up. I just wanted to disconnect from that. And then,
Yeah.
I didn't know the word self-care at the time, but I needed some self-care. I needed a change in my life. And so it was hard, but I can think back and there's these memories I have. Like, I remember so I went to a church and they let me live in this big dorm. I volunteered as like the gardener and I would blow leaves. And I remember I'd have this music. It was like Christian music, like positive music. And I was just singing along with it, blowing leaves, just happy. I was like, I felt like it was like the happiest moments of my life. Just, I'm cleaning up and blowing leaves and doing things for other people. And I just, one of the biggest things that helped me change was I was obsessed with myself and I started to serve other people. And that helped me get my mind off myself. That was one of the biggest things was like, at that time I was cleaning toilets. I was earning my keep to live there, right? I didn't have a job or anything. I was, talking to people as an usher. I was just doing everything and serving other people at the time. And it really helped me to get off myself. There was a lot of obsession with myself and what I'm going through. And I understand we have to self-analyze, right? But I was just in my head all the time. So, it took a while. I would read when I was incarcerated, but, I started reading a lot of, books, about theology and about the Bible and things like that. And it was interesting because just in general reading, it like expands your vocabulary and then your comprehension.
Totally.
And so like, I'm like, what's happening here? Like, I'm understanding and I'm able to talk without dropping an F-bomb every second. I wasn't thinking, that wasn't the reason I was reading. I just was so interested in, what I was learning. But I started to read, take care of myself more. And, again, it was a long journey because, I didn't read a lot, when I was in the streets as opposed to being incarcerated. So that was something that really helped me to kind of focus and, listening to music. And it wasn't, negative, it was positive and, just those things. But it took time. It took a while for me to get out of that zone. I think it took months for me to not feel like I was high. I did so much drugs, so, I was doing cocaine, crystal meth, angel dust, which is like an elephant tranquilizer, alcohol every single day. So it's just like, okay, I'm like, I need to let my body rest from all these things. Yeah. So, but yeah, the biggest thing I think was just serving other people and, investing in myself, reading and focusing.
That's beautiful and such a big shift. And I guess like that again illustrates the power of those kind of breakthrough moments where, again, for some people, I don't want anyone listening to think, well, if I didn't have it just like change my life like that, I didn't have it. You can have a breakthrough experience and it can kind of take time to integrate. But in your situation, like such a huge transformation, that's a lot. That's a lot, even when it's happy and it's good.
I want to share something about that too, because you know what? You have to be careful with that also, because like I burned myself out. That's why the book is Pain to Purpose to Peace, because I started to do so much for other people that I started to neglect myself, and then was married, neglect my family, and you have to be careful with that. Like, again, I'm an obsessive person. So I constantly wanted to be in this zone of like serving. The freedom from addiction was immediate, but the process of changing took years. And even understanding like you don't always have to be on. I felt like I was always on, at church, around people. I felt like maybe watching other people, I had to be perfect all the time, or, that wore me out almost as much as my old life. That whole part of my life, it was great, like you said, to just refocus, reorient. But then I became obsessed with that serving, that it wore me out. I relapsed 11 years after I didn't drink. And that was really depressing because I was caught in that for a few years. I did get help. I went to an outpatient program that really helped me. Not only didn't only focus on addiction, but also like trauma and other things that I dealt with. There was like many layers of support that I received from the program that I went to. But yeah, I didn't realize that I was just wearing myself down.
Absolutely. What would you say are some of the things that help you even today, like skills that you cultivated or tools and resources, or even mentors and support systems that helped you find that balance and maintain it? And I know balance is one of those things that we talk about that's like there's no such thing, but
Yeah.
we strive for it, right? Like we strive to not be too far on the obsessive side in your case and too far on the like not caring at all, like where's that healthy middle ground? What was that like for you?
Yeah, for me, in the book I shared that, the opposite of trauma and pain is fun. And I try to have fun. I skateboard. I'm 49
love
years
that.
old. I just turned 49. But I skate what's called vert, like in the pools or at skate parks. I know how to, it's called carving, like roll around a pool. So I skateboard with my youngest son. I have 5 children. We have a blended family, but my youngest one skateboards with me. I take walks in the morning. I read. I start to get really overwhelmed a lot. It still happens to me now, and I get anxiety. Before COVID really affected me emotionally and physically because I was working out every day, getting up, and then when the gyms closed, like I completely stopped, and I started to like focus on eating, so I'm just like so now I'm like, like I have to, the things I do to kind of refocus is take walks, spend time with my family, skateboard. I'm like a serial entrepreneur for the type of work that I do, and so I'm always creating things. I love to create different programs and write different types of things. So those are the things that bring me joy in my life.
Joy makes such a difference. It's something that I put into practice in my, mid 20s when I was trying to figure out how do I live a life where I'm not depressed all the time, because I was very depressed growing up, very suicidal, very unhappy, didn't feel like I knew who I was or wasn't fulfilled by life or work, and like living my joy is a mantra for me, and it's something I've been working on again lately, is like prioritizing joy. And it seems so simple, it seems so basic, but it can make such a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Because even just a little bit of time, it's so funny. Like sometimes I'll be at work, right? Because I'm, at schools like all day. And I'm training I have a team, and I'm constantly trying to train them because I know exactly what I want, like on those campuses, what I needed, But in the middle of the day, I'll drive by a skate park and I have my board in my car and I'll just ride through the park real quick and I'll, just spend some time. If it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I know everybody. If you come to San Jose and you go to a skate park and you say, Pastor Danny, I'm an ordained pastor. If you say that, the kids will know who I am. But maybe 90% of them will know me in the park because I go out there and hang out with them and have fun in our community here. I love to be out, and doing that. But that brings me joy. And I love when other people are happy. I love when, because when I say I wanted to, in the beginning of our talk, I wanted to be loved. I think I wanted people to see that I was valuable, that I wasn't, just this worthless, dumb, ex-convict, this uneducated, and I like to invest that into others too, because I see value in everyone. And everyone's gifted in some way.
It's beautiful. And it's so true. And sometimes that's literally all we need. Like it's not the solution for everything, but to have somebody see us and love us for exactly who we are, including and especially all of our imperfections and our failures and our flaws, like that can go such a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My moment of transformation, and then people taking time, to spend with me and talk with me. Like nobody really talked to me. I look back and I'm like, nobody really sat me down. If I was getting sat down somewhere, I was either in the principal's office, or getting talked to about my homework, or it was a judge or a police officer. I don't remember any of those moments not being in trouble, really. Nobody was like caring and investing, and, my life changed. And, the people at church, people would talk to me and be interested in my life and want to know about me. And I got to learn a lot about, because all I knew was this area where I grew up, and I started to learn more about, outside of my area, what other people were doing. And it seems so far away. The other side of town just seems so far away for me. And it was interesting how all of that was bridged, and I could see because that's one thing we do also. And I know you wanted to talk about this. It's like when I work with students, I want them to see outside their current circumstance. And, when you're ready to talk about that, we can definitely talk about that.
But, Let's do it, because I would love to hear both. I mean, I want to talk about what you do, and of course we're going to link to everything in the show notes. But before you talk about that, like leading into talking about that, I would love if you could share a little bit about like when you started doing this work and what that looked like.
Looking back, there was, like you said, there's like this, I had this love. I wanted to be loved, but I also wanted to give love, and I didn't know how.
Yeah.
And so, like my whole life, I covered that part of me, like I had mentioned. I remember, like, when I had that moment, I wanted all my friends to experience what I experienced, right? Maybe I wasn't the best at communicating when I first changed my life, with my faith, but I wanted every person that I knew that was in some similar experience that I had in life to know that there's hope, to know that there's something different. And I knew that the things for me were like again, would help me. It's like I had to, change where I hung out, not drink, start to read, start to practice new things. And so I started to have opportunity to really meet people as an usher at church. I was standing at the door, and I volunteered for 3 years being an usher at our church, chit-chatting with people as they were coming in and out and learning people and them talking to me. And then I had an opportunity to work with youth, with the children's ministry, and sharing a little bit. And then I had an opportunity to work with middle school and high school. That's where it really felt like that was my calling, like what I wanted to do in life. They let me share my story with the youth at the church I was at. That's what really changed me. Like I wanted to be someone that could speak into life and help guide and direct youth. So that started about maybe 3 years after my life changed. I spent a long time, like the 3 years. I don't know, that might seem, felt like an eternity for me, but for some people it might not be that long. But I spent a lot of time just working on myself.
Yeah.
And I think that, when I started, I had opportunities to work with the youth at church and share with them and things like that. Like I was learning how to be a Bible teacher and all these things. But I was introduced by one of the members of the church to the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force a few years after I got to church, maybe 6 or 7 years after I got to church. When I learned about, like, I already knew what my community was like, but I was kind of disconnected because I was in this different world. But then when I heard what was happening in my community, it just sparked something like, yeah. I need to get back to where I came from. I need to go back. And that's where really everything started to change. I think what helped shape me was spending time investing in myself and learning myself. I was a volunteer chaplain at a hospital. I would volunteer to go visit people and take food to people. So all these practices I had, like listening to people, talking to people, I started to be able to use those working with the youth, later on. And it wasn't something that was planned. It was just something that I love to do. Like there was an opportunity for me to be a chaplain at a volunteer chaplain at a hospital. So I went and helped people that were sick, and talked to them and prayed with them. Or when I was the usher, talking to people, that maybe some of them were elderly and were alone, and they spent a lot more time talking to me about, maybe they lost their wife or whatever it was. And I started to learn how to just really connect with people in that way. And we served the community by, giving food out and stuff like that. So all of these practices I started to use in the work that I'm doing now. That was like the birth of it. But again, none of it was planned. Not even being a pastor was planned. I would look at pastors speak, and I remember I'm like, where did they even get that from? I couldn't even comprehend. You're reading a book and you're telling me all this stuff, but like I'm feeling it, but I don't know where you're getting it from. Like, so,
right.
Yeah. So that was like, I think the calling is when I started to hear that people in my community were dying because, in 2010, I got connected with the Gang Task Force, and our mayor at the time had invited the faith community. He wanted to invite us to, create something that can be of service to the community. And I created a crisis response program for the city of San Jose. What we did was we'd respond to youth violence, whether it was bedside intervention or homicide. And it was and still is heartbreaking and terrible to be with a family and young people that are dealing with loss. In 2012, we had a 25-year high. We were one of the safest big cities in America. I knew that was my calling. Like I could not, with a good conscience, sit at church and be a pastor when people in my community were dying. I was like, no, I need to be with the people out there. I need to share with them. But I didn't know what I was doing. I was been in church for 8 years, 9 years, kind of separated from that life. But I really felt led to do that. And that's where it really was birthed into what I'm doing now. Because I was ordained, I would help with the funerals. A lot of the families, because I would work with them through their loss. We'd help them, spiritual care. We would get donations from churches. We would get food and help them through the difficult times. They would ask me, can you share at this funeral? And I remember at one of the funerals, there was a young man. He was still in high school. He was 18 years old. He was shot and killed down the street from his home. And he had a single dad who raised him. I spent a lot of time with that father. He asked if I could share at his funeral. When it was time for people to come and share memories of, a few words about his life, it took 2.5 hours. Usually it's like 10, 15 minutes. There were coaches, friends, and I looked out to the crowd, and I really felt in my heart like God was telling me, like, they're like sheep without a shepherd. I could smell marijuana, alcohol. I'm not saying everybody was drinking or smoking. People were crying. People were angry. People were just blank face. And it started to become evident to me what I needed to do. Like, I needed to work with these people. I didn't want to be there after.
Yeah.
I needed to be there before and work in their lives. And it's funny because after I would be at a McDonald's, something, these kids would come up to me oh, you're the priest who did my homie's funeral. They would say, you did Sleepy's funeral, or you helped Flacco's family. These are all their nicknames, their gang nicknames, of the homicide victims. And I started to be recognized as that person. I said, I'm going to use this to build relationships in my community and start investing in these kids and teaching them that there's another way, like there was for me. I wanted to teach them that, this doesn't have to be your life. It's painful, and I know the pain, and I'm going to share with you, how I got through this pain, overcame it, and I'm able to give back. And it's funny now because the kids, they're like, oh, we want to do what you do. We want to do the kind of work that you do, want to help people. And, there's been kids that have left gangs that we work with. There's been kids that, were not on track to graduate, and they're graduating. There's this, I remember how it started and just where it is right now, just to see the success and people, you're talking about that moment when things click, and to see it when they're younger, it's a beautiful thing.
Oh my goodness. That's such a powerful journey. And it's such a powerful example of another thing we talk on the show is how life shapes us. Life shapes us into the person that we're here to be and doing the work that we're here to do. And you're such a beautiful example of that. And I'm just so honored to have had you on the show. And I hate to end the conversation. I still have so many questions for you. But to wrap things up, since we're at the top of the hour, I would love if you could share where people can find you, how they can learn from you, and how they can work with you.
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. Our organization, we are the City Peace Project, at the City Peace Project. Our YouTube, the City Peace Project, thecitypeaceproject.com. Also, there's links to my book. My book is on Amazon. It is Post-Traumatic Quest, my quest to transcend trauma, turn my pain to purpose, and find peace. They can also buy it from posttraumaticquest.com. Also, if people are interested in what we're doing, just follow our Instagram. You'll see these kids and what we're doing, the things that I'm talking about. There's so many different, experiences they have. I know we're short with time, but if I could just share one more thing.
Go for it.
COVID, there was a lot of tension coming back on the high school campuses. And I remember the first day I got back on the campuses here, in the 12 years I've done this type of work, there's never been any, people that have disrespected me. But this year just seemed different. People were guarded. They've been a lot of our students have been isolated from friends, from other family members. And I was like, how do I break this wall? There seems like so much tension. There was a lot of fights on campuses. So we started, what's the way to the heart? The stomach, right? So we started to bring pizza and chips, and we just said, hey, if you want a bag of chips, you got to throw a peace sign, and so we just, we call it proactive peace making on campuses. So if you see our Instagram, we are more than just, giving out pizza. We do mentoring, we do life coaching, we do conflict resolution. And, we just help kids in goal setting with students, help them get on track and stuff like that. But just if you want a visual of what we do, just check out at the City Peace Project, the City Peace Project on Instagram. There's a lot on there, and the videos you'll see on YouTube. You can also on my personal Instagram is at Pastor Danny _Sanchez.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. I wish that we had more time to chat and that you could share more of your wisdom. But Danny, thank you so much for being here, for sharing just like it feels like such a small portion of what you've been through and what you've learned from it, but it's so powerful. And I know that there's a lot of people that are going to get a lot out of this. And I'm so grateful. Like I said, I think it's really important. One of our missions, which is coming in the near future, is to start bringing curriculum into schools and to kids, because it's just so critical. If I would have had these skills when I was younger, if you would have had these skills when you were younger, like our lives could have been a lot different. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I just, it's an opportunity to share that, lives can be changed, and I think because people that are incarcerated, there's an 80% chance of recidivism. I was a statistic, but I changed.
Yeah.
I was able to kind of remove myself from that life and do what I do now. And I really appreciate the opportunity that you've given me to share this with others. We have this time right now, but, if they want to learn more about what we're doing, you can definitely look us up, thecitypeaceproject.org. Thank you.